quick. I want to have things ringing when we get going. But I don't know. It's not a meditation unless somebody's phone rings or somebody comes in late. All of that good stuff. Those are all good things to happen. Okay, without further ado, I'll leave it up to George. Thank y'all.
Just checking my phone. There we go. New year, new practice is kind of what I was going to talk about. But actually, when you think of that, isn't that a question of where do you want to be? Where are you going? What are you doing? Are you living a meaningful life is a question you might ask yourself. Do you know what living a meaningful life is? Do you have a sense of what meaning is? Have you been able to pull together a way of operating in the world that actually produces the space for you to explore the things that matter to you? How do you open the space of exploration for meaning? These are all the questions, what I mean by New Year, new practice. In order for this space of creative exploration to open, you have to feel safe enough that you can retire from a vigilant awareness of the environment that you're in. So you have to let down that vigilance so that you can absorb into the activity of discovery. One of the things that is required in order to do that is a sense that you have people around you who will keep you safe so that you don't have to pay attention the whole time to the environment that you're in. And one of the things about communities of people who have relied on addiction as a way of managing the anxiety of the environment is we don't tend to find reliable people and put them around us. And that's one of the main inhibitions in being able to open the exploration space. You don't have a sense that somebody actually is reliably available to protect you so that you can let go of the vigilance of the environment. So we might be saying, how well are you doing with the network, the social network of intimates around you? How many of those do you need, for instance? Do you have a sense of that? How many people do you need in your life so that when you need somebody that you need to be able to be authentically expressive with are going to be available to you? We like to rely on the research of Robin Dunbar, who's a British researcher, and he made the bold claim that in his wide survey of people, the number of intimate relationships that you need is between 2 and 5, which I found quite relieving. And then he structured the nature of relationships, A, B, C, D, E. A relationships are people that you take care of on a daily or every other day basis, that you tell everything to, that's above the line, right? That you're able to be fully expressive of your authentic experience of things without the fear of being abandoned if you reveal yourself. The second level is B relationships, people you see weekly or every other week, that you are free to be expressive without the fear of being abandoned. C relationships are the people that you encounter ordinarily in your life as you wander around. And he broke that into 2 places. C plus relationships and C relationships. C plus relationships are people that have all of the qualities that you might include in your A and B relationships, except that you don't have bandwidth to support so many relationships. C relationships are people that you encounter just ordinarily in the way that your life is structured. quarterly at least, let's say. And then D relationships are people that you see at least yearly. How ironic is it that for most of us, our family members are in the D category? Aren't they the ones who are supposed to be the closest to us that have our back? And yet, for so many of us, we just sort of position them for the holidays. And the rest of the time, we put them off with vague excuses of why we're not going to show up. E relationships is a new category. So I'm talking, and let me give you some numbers. So most people can have one A relationship. They don't have bandwidth for more than one. Even in the Pali community, it seems that one primary relationship. And then 2 to 5 of the B relationships, 15 or so of the C pluses, 30 of C's, 150 or 120 of the D relationships. But then you're saying to me, but I have 5,000 friends on Facebook. What about them? This is the E category of people. And actually, it's not 5,000. It's only 1,500. Now we're talking about brain science here, the brain and how the brain is able to actually track these things. What's the difference between A, B, C, and D relationships that total out at about 150 and E relationships that total out at about 1,500? It takes a lot more brain power to calculate a 3D face than a 2D face. In fact, a 2D face is very little brain power to actually discern one pattern from another, whereas a three-dimensional face is harder to recognize. And so there's a much more limited bandwidth for that. So there you have it. If you did a quick inventory in your mind of your relationships, where are they in that stack? Who do you tell everything to? And what do I mean by that? You just are able to be effortlessly authentic without filtering it, without spinning it, without massaging it, and you don't worry about whether or not somebody will have a negative reaction to that. You assume a delighting reaction to that. I worked in rehabs for 12 years, and I would say that the number of A's and B's that people who come into treatment is 0, mostly, and 0 close C's. Most people are C's or D's, because you never tell them everything. You're always massaging the way that you present something. Why wouldn't you want to be authentic? Why is that? How did you learn how to do that, in fact? You learned it at home, that dyadic relationship with your caregiver when you were an infant. There you were, presenting yourself to the world. Hello, world! I don't even know what I need, but something. And then you had a sensitively attuned caregiver who tapped into you and began to understand your gestures and what that represented, and they began to take care of you in just the way that you needed, and it was so reliable that you didn't worry about it, and so the creative space for exploration opened between you and your caregivers, and you were supported and encouraged and delighted in to do all of that, which is not probably what happened if you're sitting here. However, we can begin a process of letting people know what's actually going on with us. One of the dilemmas that we face in not doing that is that the way that we present ourselves draws people to us. If we present if we misrepresent ourselves, the people that are drawing to us do not consider this a misrepresentation. Actually, we just all assume that this is who you are. And so you draw people to the misrepresentation, and they want the misrepresentation. And if you were to suddenly fling off the robe of misrepresentation and tell them who you are, hoping that they would have seen through the misrepresentation to who you really are and have actually wanted that, most of the time we're going to be sorely disappointed because they didn't really see through the misrepresentation. They wanted the misrepresentation, and then that's not who you are, and so you, in some sense, obligate yourself to being someone else. Do you have a sense of that being painful? Can you imagine then yourself as a child in a situation where your caregivers didn't really want who you were, and so you had to then become who they wanted, which is how you learned the mechanism of misrepresentation. It's a double bummer. In the sense that you then developed who they wanted and not who you are. And so you're very good at being somebody else, but much less good at being who you are. And so part of the dilemma for this is to begin to use those resources to develop who you are authentically, and then come into a place of safety where you feel that you can express yourself as you are in a spontaneous way. Freely authentic is the phrase that I like to use. Can you be freely authentic? And delight in who you are in that sense. So that when we say freedom in that meditation sense, to be completely free is to be completely unrestrained by the fearfulness that we'll be abandoned if we do that. And I can also reassure you that it was a terrible experience to learn how to be inauthentic, and that you did it and you resisted it in every way that you could, and that you were overpowered and adapted because that was the choice that you were given. Is that all making sense? So you might be aware of that vigilance that you have, that focusing in on people and tracking how they're responding and moderating how you're presenting, so that you're massaging the way that they're reacting to you, so that ultimately you can get what you want from them. Familiar with that? It's very lonely, I would guess. And sad. And feels unsafe. And then we get to the meaning part. All right, well, what are you doing in your life? Are you doing the thing in your life that you want to be doing? If you could do anything, are you doing that thing? Or are you doing something else? Do you have a good sense of what it is that you want to do? Do you have a sense of what you're good at doing? And have you organized it in such a way that the better part of the day is spent engaged in that? That would be a life of meaning. Or is the better part of the day engaged in something else? Or the gathering of time, energy, and resources? One of the things that happens for people that are good at exploring is they're able to build these social networks of people that are very regulating. And so you have around you the people that you need to catch you. In order to take a risk, you have to risk the emotional dysregulation that comes from it going badly, or often going too well? Do you have good strategies for regulating really good things, or are they as dysregulating as things that are really bad? Right? I think it was, everything's going so well, let's celebrate. Let's have a cocktail. Everything's going really badly, let's have a cocktail. I'm bored, let's have a cocktail. When we talk about the development of emotional regulation, you want to be brilliant at regulating yourself, you really do. You want to be so good at it. And at the same time, you have to recognize that it's easy to get into a situation where you can't regulate yourself. And so then what you want is people around you that will help you re-regulate. And so that securely attached place is being brilliant at regulating yourself and then relying on other people to help you when you get dysregulated. And it's the same thing. In addiction, it's auto-regulating. And the difference between that collaborative regulation and auto-regulation is that we really are trying to construct a life where we don't have to rely on anyone for that emotional regulation. That we are an island unto ourselves, really. That's the main strategy. And the reason that we get involved in addictive strategies is because we can regulate with the addictive strategies without having to rely on someone else. Now, in childhood, often it's process addictions that we use instead of substance addictions because the level of pain is less. It depends on how chaotic your environment was. But I mean, in my family, I was a daily drinker in 5th grade, so that would be 9 years old. And I was also a opiate user at that age. My dad was a physician and he drugged his children so that they would behave, I guess you would say. But I also grew up in a family where everybody regulated with alcohol and substances. My mom was an alcoholic and a pharmaceutical addict, and so that was just the normal way. And we all learn to regulate ourselves by watching how the caregivers around us regulate. What happened to you? That's the question, right? Because you are likely using the strategies that you witnessed in the family system that you got. And every family is unique in that sense. You are in fact unique. We like to say the human condition, we are all so alike and at the same time completely unique. And so really do have to reflect on what happened to you. And more than that, what it meant to you. What was the meaning that you associated with it? Once you get past childhood and the intensity of experiences increases and really you're on your own to fend for yourself, then people who want to create a life where they don't actually have to depend on anyone else end up using substances because the process addictions aren't as effective in regulating the painfulness of a life in complete isolation. And I think that if the first dose that we took that offered us that flash of recognition, oh, this is actually relieving of that, if we could have stayed at that dose, we probably all would have been totally managed, right? But then the effect of tolerance kicks in. And all of a sudden, that dose doesn't work so well anymore. And so you have to increase the dose to get the effect. And then you have to increase it more to get the same effect. And then you have to increase it more to get the same effect. And then at a certain point, the dose is so high, it interferes with your capacity to function in the way that you're expected to function. And at a certain point, the doses are so high that external forces begin to put pressure on you to change what you're doing. Have you had that effect? Do you know what I mean? Or you could just do a detox, you know, up. The dose is so high that you're not getting any effect on it, so you just take 3 months off, and then the low dose works again, and then you build up again. The alternative to that, of course, is to rely on people, but forget that. I would never do that. And I don't necessarily mean the kind of relationships that we sometimes find ourselves in when we're actively engaging in our use. Those relationships really aren't around authenticity in the way that I mean it, that you could say anything and anticipate that they would be delighted in your point of view. Is that all making sense? Is it relatable? When we look at the development of attachment, what we're looking at really in the very beginning is this relationship between the primary caregiver and you, the infant. And human beings are really not good at recognizing themselves. We really depend on the reflection of someone else to inform us how we are. And so, as the infant, we look into the face of the caregiver, and the experience of the caregiver reflects back to us who we begin to understand we are. And so, depending on how put together your caregivers and who you pick, right? There is some agency. If you have more than one adult around you, you'll pick one out of the group of adults to become the model for yourself. If you have a resourced caregiver that's capable of responding to you, they reflect back to you this person whose needs are in line with the world and with the resources, a sense of delight, a sense of pleasure in taking care of you. And so you think of yourself as somebody who's delightful and who people enjoy being with and enjoy taking care of. And that's the message. But if you grow up in a family system where you don't have a resourced caregiver and they're overwhelmed by the experience of taking care of you, what they reflect back to you is somebody who's overwhelming, somebody who's demanding, somebody who's too needy, somebody who is a burden. And then you develop that internal, that core sense of yourself as somebody who's unwanted. But it isn't that you're unwantable, it's that you had an overwhelmed caregiver. And so this is what we need to begin to see them clearly, to understand their failure as their failure, and not because we were an impossible infant. Have you seen an impossible infant? No, you haven't. What you've seen is a little being, a tiny little being that needs to be taken care of. It is a lot to do to take care of a child. But that you weren't well taken care of was not because you did something that was too much. I just really want you to get this. It's not possible. Even in the most demanding, it's not possible for you to have been too much. Inherently. You could have been too much for your caregiver, but that's on your caregiver. That's not on you. You had ordinary needs. You were, the ordinariness of all of this is what's so astonishing. 0 to 3, that's 0 to 3. Then what happens? Then you go into the world to form your own relationships. How did you do when you hit the playground? Did you take a look around at all of the kids that were there and decide that you were, it should be associated with the elite group that you've just created in your mind, or did you think you're going to be somewhere else in the hierarchy? One of the things about humans is we go into an environment and we immediately create a hierarchy, a social hierarchy of everybody there, and then we place ourselves in that stack. One of the things about people who have addiction is they try everything they can to elicit care from their caregivers, and nothing works. And so at the core of that is this idea that there's nothing I can do really to get anybody to see me and value me and take care of me. And depending on how well you are defended against that sadness, the standard approach to that is to inflate yourself. So you might think, oh, I'm the best kid here, but I'm not going to relate to anybody because none of you are worth it. All right. Or, geez, everybody here is so scary, I'm going to be invisible and hopefully no one will see me. Those are the two main strategies of people who use substances, processes. Did you recognize yourself in your strategy yet? I'm confident that you don't have to continue that if you don't want to. I'm confident that there are things that you can do that will change that, and so that your point of view of yourself and also your perception of the world is completely different than that. And this comes into that Buddhist meditation idea of seeing yourself clearly. So in understanding the way that you create the experience of yourself and you create the experience of reality. We take a highly curated sampling of everything that's around us, and then we assign meaning to it, and we create a sense of reality from that. So through all the sense gates, gathering it. The body stores information about perception of things. So if it's categorized as urgent, it snaps to your attention. If it's neutral, for the most part, we never attend to it. And if there's time for a pleasant experience, we engage in that pleasant experience. When that forms a queue of these mind moments, and when the mind moment gets to the top of the queue, it surveys the perceptual database. So that database that we all have of our experiences, that we call it conditioning. And if there's an entry in that database that matches the perception of the present moment, that whole thread of meaning attaches. Some of these threads go all the way back to early childhood. Some of them are newer than that. But we exist in this human experience of the present moment, which is both the present moment and what's happening now, and the whole thread, the whole depth of meaning of every time we've had an experience that's similar like this. Is that making sense? And then it rolls into conceptual reality. And so we have the witnessing self experience of this happening. And if we don't pay attention to the meaning that we've made, we may not notice that there is this moment, but also the associations of this kind of experience that goes way back often. And it provides a real richness, and it does provide a sense of meaning in this, that I've defined this moment. So what is your experience of sitting and listening to somebody talk about whatever they're talking about? Does that create in you a potential of interest and excitement that something that's important is being presented, or is it just, I can't deal with this is boring? Or I was in a class this morning And I was outraged by the self-centeredness of the people that were speaking. That was my experience of being in the class. So I left early. What is it? Everything is fine. Part of that, of course, is the expectation of what will happen. What is the expectation that when you create this moment, what is the expectation that you have for what's going to happen? And can you track all of that? That's what we want to begin to do so that we can understand the way in which we're creating the experience of this. So are you creating the experience that this has potential to be helpful to me, and so I'm going to engage in it? Or do you have the experience of this is the same old bullshit I've always heard and it's not going to go anywhere and I'm wasting my time? What is it that's happening in the mind? Or can't pay attention to this, it's too complex. What is it that's happening? And can you then just represent that, right? Can you just be that with the expectation that that's going to be fine? The idea. One of the things about developing authenticity is that lack of anxiety. And really, what we're talking about in the shift from insecure and disorganized attachment to a sense of security is that anxiety goes away. Not that you have to learn new skills or that you have better tools to deal with it. It just doesn't arise because you've created a different reality. You've created a different expectation. Is that making sense? What does that mean? So then how do you do it? I guess maybe that's a better thing to talk about. What we begin to do is to track how we create meaning in each moment, right? How do you do it? And I gave you a description of it. So we survey the environment, we grab the things that have interest to us. We're always grabbing things that have interest and we're always leaving out the things that don't have interest. And then we're assigning meaning to it. Part of that assigning of meaning is the expectation of what will happen. We have to be able to mentalize fast enough that we can see all of that, right? I've just made a meaning out of this moment. What meaning did I make? What about that meaning would I think of expressing to someone else? What would I say? That would be an authentic representation of myself to someone else. And then can I gather in the way that they respond to that so I can understand that their experience of me and the information that I've imparted to them, can I take in their response to that, and then can I adapt my understanding of our relationship so that we're always in a sense of connection in that way. I understand you, you understand me. That would be a secure function. And then I see that you stay, which means you're not going to leave me, which is the thing that settles the anxiety. That abandonment anxiety is always that I'm going to do something and you're going to leave me. Or you're going to do something and I can't stay because you do that. Because we're creating the meaning of the present moment, what we need to begin to do is create alternative meanings in our database so that we can inform the meaning of the present moment in a way that's different from the habitual way that we tend to do it. Is that making sense? So the main way that we remap the perceptual database is doing some ideal parent figure work. So in ideal parent figure, we visualize ideal parent figures. We're not intending to replace the parent figures that you did have. We're attempting to add an alternative that's completely separate from that. It's not, in some sense, the idea that we're pretending that what happened to us didn't happen to us. It did happen to us. We don't want to change that perception, but what we do want to do is create an alternative so that we can make a sense of reality now that's based on something different than what did happen to us, so that we can then project a different potential outcome than the things that happened to us when we were younger. Is that making sense? So what I thought we could do today is some ideal parent figure protocol, and then add to that at the end a exploration, so that you begin to have a sense of how you might explore the world in a way that was quite different than what might have happened when you were younger. Any questions before we do that? Okay. So go ahead and take a meditation posture. Closing the eyes, scanning through the body, looking for any tension you might be holding, seeing if you can release it. Now bring your attention to the breath. See if you can fall into the natural rhythm of the rising and falling of the breath. Opening your eyes on the in-breath, closing your eyes on the out-breath. Now begin to extend the out-breath. See if you can make each out-breath a little bit longer than the one before it, deeply relaxing. The body-mind continuing to open the eyes on the in-breath, close the eyes on the out-breath. At a certain point, it feel natural just to let the eyes stay closed. When that happens, just let them stay closed. Turning your attention inward, continuing to elongate the out-breath. See if you can take the body-mind into deeper and deeper states of relaxation with each out-breath. Now let the breath return to normal. See if you can imagine yourself being lifted up and floating on a big, warm, fluffy cloud, totally weightless, completely relaxed. Now imagine this cloud is transporting you to an especially safe place, and when you arrive in this especially safe place, really take it in. Now what I'd like you to do is see if you can imagine yourself as a young child in this especially safe place. And now what I'd like you to do is see if you can imagine an ideal mother figure for you as a young child. So it's different than your family of origin. It's not based on your actual mother. It's not a correction for your actual mother. It's not based on anyone you've known. An entirely imaginary ideal mother figure, perfectly suited to your nature in every way. See if you can imagine her in some detail. Notice how she is with you, how she's very sensitively attuned to you, how she picks up on the subtlest changes in your moods and in your mind states, and how she consistently responds to you in exactly the right way, in exactly the way that you've always needed somebody to. Notice that she's able to provide physical affection for you in just the way that you need. If you need her close, she's immediately available to you and will provide all of the physical affection that you need. If you need space, she gives you all the space you need. She never hovers or controls or intrudes in any way. Now let that scene fade. Continue to imagine that you're a young child in this especially safe place. What I'd like you to do now is see if you can imagine an ideal father figure for you as a young child. Different than your family of origin. It's not based on your actual father, not a correction for your actual father, not based on anyone you've known. An entirely imaginary ideal father figure, perfectly suited to your nature in every way. See if you can imagine him in some detail. Notice how he is with you, how he's very sensitively attuned to you, how he picks up on the subtlest changes in your moods and in your mind states, and how he consistently responds to you in exactly the right way, in exactly the way that you've always needed somebody to. Notice how he's able to provide physical affection for you in just the right way. If you need him close, he's immediately available to you and will provide all of the physical affection that you need. If you need space, he gives you all the space you need. He never hovers or controls or intrudes in any way. Now let that scene fade. Continue to imagine that you're a young child in this especially safe place. What I'd like you to do now is see if you can imagine an ideal environment for you as a young child. This could be based on the safe place. It could be based on the place you grew up in. It could be some variation of that. It could be someplace entirely imaginary. But see if you can imagine an ideal environment for you as a young child to grow up in and to thrive. See if you can imagine it in some detail. Now what I'd like you to do is imagine that you're a young child, you're in this ideal environment, and the ideal parent figures are there with you, supporting you, encouraging you as you play, as you explore the environment. Notice how the ideal parent figures are with each other, how they're very sensitively attuned to each other, how they're very collaborative in the way that they take care of each other, how there's an easy physical affection between them. They never get so caught up in themselves that they lose track of you. If you need their attention, it's immediately available to you, and you can have all of the attention that you need. When they look at you, you can see for each one of them, you're the center of everything. When they look at you, you can see for each one of them, you're the most important person. When they look at you, you can see how much each one of them loves you. And you can take that in. You can be loved. You can be important. You can be at the center. Notice how protective the ideal parent figures are of you, and because they are so protective, you feel a deep sense of safety. And because you feel so safe, you're completely free to play, to explore in any way that you need to, because you know they're keeping you safe, they're protecting you. Notice how easy it is to get the ideal parent figure's attention, how easy it is to attune to them. And because you feel so safe with them, how easy it is for you to express yourself authentically. And because you express yourself authentically, you feel seen by them, you feel known by them, you feel accepted by them. Notice how easy it is for the ideal parent figures to emotionally regulate you, which leads you to feel completely free to play and explore in any way that you need to. Because you feel so safe with them, because you've presented yourself authentically to them, because they see you and they know just what to do to help you, which leads you to be free to play, to explore in any way that you need to, because you know no matter what happens, you can come rushing back to them and they'll be able to help you. Notice that each time the ideal parent figures see you, they light up with a sense of delight in being with you. You don't have to do anything to earn it. You don't have to take care of them. You You don't have to idealize them. It's your beingness that they're responding to. Each time they see you, they light up with a sense of delight in being with you. And you can take that in. You can be somebody who's delightful. Now what I'd like you to do is to begin a visualization. So we're going to be working with how you are now in the life that you have now, noticing that you're exploring that in a way to see what it is that you want to do for this new year that's coming. Just let the mind go, see where it takes you. Notice that the ideal parent figures are there supporting, encouraging you if you need them. And just let it unfold, see what happens. Now let the scene fade. Finding your way out of there, I'll count from 5 to 1. When I reach 1, you'll be fully present, fully awake. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fully awake, settled in the experience. How's that? I'll take that as a good.
Is it normal to see yourself as an only child in these scenarios?
Yes, in the sense of you being you.
Yeah, or anybody. I mean, because if you're the one to pull the attention of your parents. I have 6 other siblings.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
center of attention.
it's interesting. Some people see the ideal parent figures as their own, and the siblings don't even come in. And then some people feel an obligation to have the ideal parent figures take care of their siblings. So it's what that really is representative of what role you were assigned in the family system. Did you have to take care of your siblings? Did you feel that you needed to protect your siblings because of what was happening, or did you not? Did you feel involved in the social group of the siblings, or did the siblings not really attach to each other, so there wasn't much relationship across the line? That's what it's really representative of. So when we say normal, what we mean is that it is actually providing you with a map of what happened in childhood. And so it's going to be specific to you, but it isn't. That's how it's representative. Good enough? Uh-huh.
Get to a place where it's the visualization is perhaps parents or faces you've never seen before. I'm still very much my brain is just thinking of things that look like the thing that I'm into.
Right.
So like faces are coming from movies and like stuff like that, but we ever get to a place where it's just like this random visualization you're never supposed to do it. Not that that's the goal, but I'm just curious.
What we're really trying to uncover is what you wanted. So then what's going to happen is you're going to gradually be representing the ideal parent figures as an emblem of what you wanted, not necessarily what you had. The instruction is not somebody you've known. So for instance, in my experience of doing this, the number one representation of a father figure is Jason Momoa. But nobody knows Jason Momoa except as he appears in the media, which is totally fine. So you're assembling who the ideal parent figure is based on what you need them to be, based on how you've identified those representations. So all of that's fine. Some people have a hard time representing a mother figure or a father figure depending on what happened to them in relationship to that person. So, and if you can't represent a mother figure or a father figure, then the idea is to create an ideal version of yourself, to take care of yourself as a child, but depending. I was able to do the mother figure right away, but it took me a couple of months to be able to figure out the father figure, just because of the way my father was in relationship to me. And I'm, it's like a drawing rather than a photographic image. And often it's an impression of, say, fabric or some kind of textual, bodied feeling about them rather than a picture of them. So it also depends on how you see things. Not everybody's visual, right? Some people, even though we use the word visualization, we're talking about all of the sense gates. So people who are auditory, it's actually how they're speaking more than it is what they appear like. And people who are more somatic, it's how they feel in the body more than an auditory or visual representation of them. It's really how you experience the thing. And then the more you do it, of course, the variations tend to settle into a more reliable representation over time. What you needed. And then some people have different representations depending on the age that they're in when they're visualizing it. So a different representation for a young child, for mid-childhood, for adolescence. Different for now, I think, what you might need. So the main focus is it representative of what you need, what you wanted, what you needed at the time, rather than what you had. sometimes people have experiences of their caregivers who sometimes took care of them well and sometimes didn't take care of them well. And so it can produce a sense of guilt around imagining an alternative parent because of the sense that the caregivers were good at times. And then if you had a lot of role reversing in childhood where you actually were responsible for taking care of your caregiver, there can be also a sense that you're betraying your bio parents by imagining an alternative to them, where you feel a sense that if you abandon them, they won't survive, which is another thing that happens in role reversal. The caregiver convinces you that if you leave them, that they'll perish and it will be your fault. So you restrict your whole life so that you don't do that, and imagining alternative parent figures can aggravate that. So all of these things, we're not looking so much for a representation of this that matches what other people are doing. We're really looking at this as an insight into the early part of your life that you don't remember because it was before that happened. And the way that you begin to visualize this really is a representation of how you're holding that. So that gives you the direct insight into, oh, this is what happened to me. This is why I'm like this. Do I really have to honor those agreements that I made in early childhood now? The answer is no.
One of the things that I was trying to visualize was, I not only had trauma within the house, it was major trauma outside of the house. So I'm trying to imagine parents, a family situation where there's no trauma in the house, but I have been traumatized outside the house. What would, if I had a supportive, nurturing family, nurturing parents, what would they have done when they had found out about the trauma? What would the words...
They would have prevented it from happening in the first place.
That too, very much so.
Yeah. They would have protected you so you weren't vulnerable to it. That's what they would do. In the ideal parent figure protocol, working with trauma, it's an indirect trauma reprocessing thing, so you never go into the trauma. One of the things about going into trauma for disorganized people is that it tends to be ineffective in relieving you of the traumatic experience, and it can further disorganize the underlying attachment strategy. And so in an indirect process, you go after it's over and have the ideal parent figures comfort and soothe, and then you have them go before it happens, and then you have them prevent it from happening. And then you have them help you visualize an ideal outcome. One of the things, particularly when the abuse is inside the household, what's missing in that whole picture is what you wanted to have happen instead of what did happen. And so then there's the visualization of an ideal outcome. The reason that part is important is because we create in each moment of reality our expectation of what we can get out of it. And when you have trauma, what it tends to do is make you predict that you're going to have a traumatic outcome. And so each time you create reality, all of the possibilities except the traumatic outcomes disappear, and you don't ever make those choices. And so we're always walking ourselves back into traumatic situations because we think that that's the only possibility. So what we begin to do then is open up this range of things that can happen, right? In each moment, all of the things that you could choose, the full range of things that you could choose are there and available for you to choose them, but only if you can recognize them. And when we get into this pattern of just making the meaning being a representation of the trauma and then the inevitable outcome of that, we don't pick the rest of them. We just pick that narrow channel. That's the repetition of it. So, and then, most of us who have a lot of trauma, because our confidence in picking people who won't hurt us is so low, tend to put up a lot of defenses. We think that the defenses are going to work on preventing people from hurting us, but actually what they do is defend us against all of the people that won't hurt us, and leaving us vulnerable just to the people who will hurt us, because they're the only ones who are willing to push through that whole range of defense that we put. So, or we just, what's very typical in that is by the time you reach your 30s, you're so disappointed with relationships failing one after the other, you just make the decision not to try anymore, and so you withdraw. And then you figure out how you're going to be alone. And if you really figure that out and you can make a life where you don't have to rely on anybody, this is really hard to overcome, because relationships are so much about compromise and so much about resources that go to the care of somebody else, that when you actually figure out how to do it without anybody else, you think, do I really want to compromise on this? Do I really want to? I've lived alone for 30 years. Do I really want someone else in my space? That's the conundrum to overcome. Then you have to figure out how you can be in relationship to somebody else, because you don't actually need them, because you've figured out the puzzle of being alone. So it's actually harder if you've done that. Now, if you haven't figured out how to be alone, then you have that energy that's compelling you to be in relationship to somebody else. I wish it was better news.
What was the name of the researcher that you mentioned at the start? You had the different levels of relationship.
Robin Dunbar.
Thank you.
The last time you spoke here, you had mentioned, I had asked you a book if you could recommend, and you mentioned the attachment disorders in adults.
Yeah.
But it's a large tome, it's like 700 pages long, and it's apparently geared toward professionals. Is there something that is less daunting than that?
I had the same reaction. I ordered it, it came, I was like, what this motherfucker? I threw it on the shelf.
Why did you recommend it?
But and then I was going on retreat. I was going to be on retreat for 5 weeks. And I thought I was going to get bored and I need something to read, so I just threw it in my suitcase. And then I was bored on the retreat and I started to read it. It was a total page turner. I read the whole thing in like 5 days, just page after, just flipped through. It just took me on a journey. So it's very readable and very insightful. Let's see. If I had another, now this is a question. I don't know you well enough to know how you think. Do you like things that are descriptive of and detailed and really deep, or do you like things that are more surfacey? Because, for instance, I just read a review in the paper this morning of a book called Secure, which is a new book on attachment, which is describing from a social science point of view the main attachment strategies. It will give you a sense of what the patterns are, but it won't help you at all change them. And in the social science world, the opinion is that these things are unchangeable, and so you adapt to them rather than attempt to do something about them. And this is very different from the way that I think about it, because I know that you can change these things, and that it's worth the effort to change them rather than to adapt to them, particularly if you're toward the disorganized end of things, because you function so much less well than you could if you were willing to do the work. So that would be the point of view of that. The most popular book on attachment is called, I think it's called, I can't remember anyway, I hated it, so I don't recommend it. Trying to think of another one. I don't know.
So you go really old school and go Piaget.
Piaget.
Could be worth a look.
Do you know Piaget?
It was the education.
One of my favorite pictures in the world is Piaget. Have you seen the picture of him sitting at his desk? And floor to ceiling, they're just files stacked up. It's just like a total mess, the whole office. I don't know how you are, neat or messy. I'm also a yes to mess kind of guy. So,
I like things that are deep, real deep, but can be explained that a layperson can understand it, that it doesn't turn into a chemical formula, you know what I mean, or some mathematical equation that you have to figure out.
I would still recommend the Dan Brown book. But if you have problems...
No, I'm going to try it now that you said your experience with it.
Yeah, no, I loved it. It just was a complete page turner for me. And he writes so beautifully. It's easy to understand, not too technical.
I think I was paying too much attention to the reviews on it.
Oh, what?
The reviews were saying, oh, you know, you skip the first half of it and just get into the second half and things like that.
Well, it is comprehensive. So it covers the history of the development of the theory, which is the first third. The middle third of the book is describing the different attachment experiences and what childhood experiences result in those. That's very useful, I think, in terms of beginning to understand. The dilemma for us all is we don't remember what happened to us that caused these automatic responses. But the conditioning is so direct that if you really pay attention to how you are now, you'll be able to directly understand what must have happened to you. And also it leads to the path of how to come out of it in a way. And really the description that we're talking about is coming into a place where we feel free to be ourselves in relationship to other people. That's what we're talking about. And if you don't really ever have that, there's never that place of just relaxing, just being. It's really hard to get there without that. And without that sense of safety that comes from other people. And you know, most of us in the addiction world, other people are not safe, and we never relax. We're always on top. We use substances to loosen it up a little bit so that we can at least relate, but without that, it's really hard to be open, just spontaneous with people. We're always over-monitoring, always calculating. That's the condition of it. And to see that actually was what we needed to do in relationship to our caregivers because of how the environment was that we grew up in, and that it's not innate in us, and that all people are not unsafe in the way that we experienced is the thing. To be free in the end. Well, and which is the long goal of meditation anyway, right? To be free. That's the thing we keep saying. How do you be free? How you be free is you begin to understand how you were conditioned, so you understand where you were caught up, and then you begin to unhook from all of that until you can be just free. To be free, when you really get it, if you are just the way that you are and expressive of that, and maintaining consent, right? You're not too intimate, and people have consented to that, and you don't feel compelled to reveal beyond what you want to because somebody's imploring you to do that. The people that are drawn to you are the people who want that. And so that's their expectation, and they enjoy it. They're delighting in you being that way. But when you're constantly calculating and never really presenting yourself authentically, the people that are being drawn to you are not the people that want you the way that you are. And when you can really see that you're in some sense selecting yourself out of the freedom by presenting yourself in a particular way that isn't in line with who you are authentically.
Well, how do you know who you are? How do you know? Especially if you've been doing this all your life. What are you underneath all this?
Particularly when you've been inauthentic all your life and pursue all of the goals that go along with that false self, how do you know who you are? And that's the place where you turn the exploration toward what actually matters to you and not what effect it will produce. What is it that it's satisfying to me to engage in the activity of doing, whether it has social value or not? We have to explore to discover that.
Regarding the ABC relationships, does your therapist want to get these categories? For me, I know having living for years, it's created this dynamic where even at the subconscious level, there's a safe space and you can show up. And she will bat an eye at
Right.
stuff that I say that it like so terrified me. And so through moments of that over and over, it's just like, and now, in an interesting way, like look for those, that kind of, I don't know, it's like, now that I have that reference behind me, I just look for that.
Right.
I have 3 people, aside from my therapist, that like I feel like I can show up that way with. So,
Wonderful. I would put
if it counts, but does it
a
count?
therapist as a C+. There's in any kind of formal relationship like that, there's a structure to it, which is different than a totally intimate relationship. They have a fiduciary responsibility to you, which is imposed on the relationship. So it's a structured relationship. And you pay a fee typically to a therapist so that you're relieved of the obligation of taking care of them. You take care of them by paying the fee so that you don't have to emotionally and relationally take care of them. That's the advantage of that kind of a relationship, so that it's fair. But in an A or a B relationship, the exchange is I take care of you and you take care of me. The fee is ultimately really relieving of so much that you would normally have to do to get somebody to do that with you. That it's really a bargain.
Even with friends, there's always a fee to be paid at the end.
Yes, exactly. It's a collaborative exchange. I take care of you in the way that you need to be taken care of, and in exchange for that, you take care of me in the way that I need to be taken care of. But it's not transactional in the sense that if you pick up the groceries, I'll make dinner. But if you don't pick up the groceries, I won't make dinner. It's not like that, right? It's the whole care versus each incident of care. That's the difference. In order for somebody to take care of you in the way that you need, you have to tell them what that is, right? Which means you have to be vulnerable. This is the care that I need. If you're not willing to do that, then you can't have that. Right? And then you have to find somebody not only who is willing to do that, but is capable of taking care of you in the way that you want. That's often where we get into trouble. You need to be taken care of in a way that somebody else can't do, even though they want to. And then if you obligate yourself in a relationship where they're the only person who can take care of you, then the deal you're making is you go without the care. It's one of the reasons that sometimes deprivation comes up in relationships. The most common relationship is a exclusive, intimate relationship. So 1A, that's the most common relationship. No Bs, no close Cs. But then you're entirely dependent on one person for providing all of your emotional care. And it's just a phenomenal obligation to be completely responsible for somebody. And they're completely responsible for you. So what do you do if you want to go off and do something that they don't want to do? You don't do it, right? And they don't do it either. Then the deprivation sets in. You're not free to explore. Whereas if there were Bs around, the happiest people, according to Dunbar, if you want an A, you have an A, and then you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 Bs, so that each of you are free to go off and do the thing that you need to, because you're not leaving your partner with no one that can regulate them. And then you can come back. Thing. I think we're out of time, aren't we?
It's like it. As it is.
So we'll continue our conversation. Good to see you. I hope you have a good holiday.
And if you want to continue that conversation, I think George has some of his